Activation warning. This episode contains explicit and graphic descriptions of suicide, self-harm, sexual assault, and rape. Discretionary caution and action is required. This episode is not for children. Please use extreme self-care in listening to this episode and seek immediate help through the National Suicide Hotline by dialing 988 if you are emotionally activated or triggered by the content of this episode. Or if you are activated and need help from the National Sexual Assault Telephone Hotline, call 1-800-656-HOPE. That's 1-800-656-4673.
Words really have power. So I really try my very best to be intentional with my words. I also journal a lot. I write all the time, whether it's in my phone, whether it's in my actual physical journal. I'm always writing. I'm always getting my thoughts out because I learned that with keeping stuff in, that's when it turns into the poison. And I don't want the poison.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. I'm glad you're here. You've just tuned in to one of the most important podcasts that you may ever listen to, because the purpose of this podcast is to provide a safe space for victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault to share their stories and connect with others who've been through similar experiences. However, there are other important aspects to this podcast: community, education, and support. I believe that sharing our stories is one of the most important steps to healing, and my hope is that the SAS podcast will help victims and survivors feel less alone and more empowered. And my ultimate goal is to provide all of my listeners with insights, resources, and a supportive space where empathy, compassion, and understanding thrive. My commitment is to being there for all my listeners. I'm your host, Dave Markel, coming to you from the Podvlog studio in St. George, Utah, and I'm here each week talking to victims and survivors or interviewing experts and professionals in order to not only gain insights and information to help us on our healing path, but also to provide an education on being trauma-informed, working to help bring justice to victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault. Whether you're aware of it or not, we all know someone whose life has been impacted by rape or sexual assault. So I encourage everyone to listen to this podcast. Whatever your experience is with rape or sexual assault, you are not alone, and we are all here for each other. Thank you again for being here. Hey everyone, thank you for joining me again for another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. This is episode 82, and this week I'm thrilled to have as my guest Dr. Lori Pitts. You may remember that name from Ann Winslow's episode 2 weeks ago when Ann spoke about Dr. Lori as the former executive director of the Sexual Assault Advocacy Network, SAN, where Ann serves currently as the co-executive director. Dr. Lori is also Ann's current life coach, and Ann had nothing but excellent things to say about Dr. Lori. So I made it a priority to reach out to her and ask that she join me for this week's episode. It's an honor to have Dr. Pitts join me to share with us not only her sexual assault survivor story, but also what she's doing to progress on her own healing journey. Dr. Lori is the executive director of Still Whole Wellness, a holistic approach to life coaching that is rooted in genuine support and transformative growth. Dr. Lori is going to tell us all about it. As a side note, I want to announce that our regular monthly appearance of Carolyn Markel will not be occurring this month, as Carolyn is traveling and producing new connections for Safe in Harm's Way, the online support system which she founded. Carolyn will join us again next month, so be sure to keep an ear out for that episode. For now, let's get to this week's interview. Here's Dr. Lori. Hey, Dr. Pitts, how are you?
Hello there. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure and an honor. For my listening audience, I got introduced to Dr. Lori through Ann Winslow and the Sexual Assault Advocacy Network. Many of you have heard Ann's episode from just a few weeks ago. She mentioned Dr. Lori as her coach, someone who she derives much healing from as a life coach. When she went on and on about how amazing Dr. Lori is, I just felt the urgency to reach out. Thank you, Dr. Lori. I appreciate you being here.
It's a privilege to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. I was really grateful to receive that invitation because I listened to both of the episodes that Anne was on, and listening to your delivery, your poignant questions, just the way that you guided the space. And it was very clear that she felt safe. It was very clear that she felt safe because of her ability. Not to say that she's not an articulate person, because she absolutely is, but just in the way that she was able to formulate those concepts and things that she discussed, that let me know that this was a safe space. So when I got the invitation, I was very excited.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. That's just when people talk, is when they feel safe. I really think it's important to say the right things, ask the right questions, and especially be a good listener. And in that vein, Dr. Lori, in our communication in emails, but also on your website, I believe I saw you have mentioned that you too connect with others who have been through trauma and difficult situations because of the fact that you too have been through some horrific traumas and difficult situations. And we will get into more of your coaching and healing process. But to start this off, I'm wondering if you are willing to talk to us about your sexual assault experience. What are you able to tell us about your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. My earliest recollection was around age 5 of being violated. I've had numerous assaults throughout my life, and there are some that I just don't yet have words for. And I know that that might sound strange, but I know that I still have to honor my own process, right? I don't have to know it all and be able to fix it all. There are still parts of my story that I'm still trying to figure out. I'm still trying to put words to and really try to understand. What I've become comfortable with saying now, probably over the past, I don't know, maybe a year or so, is that I've been violated many times in my lifetime. And my earliest recollection is around the age of 5. One of the perpetrators was actually prosecuted and did serve time. He served, I believe it was like 18 years or something like that for that violation. It was a family member. I've been molested by several family members. When he was released, it was a contingency in his probation to not make contact. He violated that. I'd had my second child by then, so I was at least 28, and he reached out. And so I then contacted his probation officer, and he was rearrested, and I believe he served an additional like 15 months. But there have been others. I still don't really know what to make of them. Yeah. And I think that's really important for people to lean into and understand that you don't have to know what to call it. You don't have to understand it fully for it to not still have significance in your journey.
I am just so appreciative that you even put it into that kind of context and that you are taking care of yourself. That is such a personal, internal issue that I think every single separate assault or rape is something that we have to come to terms with, as you've mentioned, and know how to put words and feelings and emotions to it. And that can take years before you're ready to talk about it. And sometimes people don't ever talk about it. But I think what needs to be honored here is your recognition of that, and you're doing all you can to take care of yourself in the ways that you do. And I'm guessing that has a whole lot to do with your coaching experience, your educational background, but also with being trauma informed. I think that's a really awesome approach to being a coach.
It's like part of the coach's creed. You have to take care of yourself first. Every single day, I jokingly, but almost not jokingly, I will tease my clients and I tell them that they essentially pay me to take care of me, because I have to be well in order to care for them. So that means I have to be deliberate and intentional about creating space for me to be well. I have to cultivate that into my everyday life. And even in my sessions, I have to make sure that I'm taking care of myself, even in that space. So this definitely has had a lot to do with why coaching with this particular population. It's familiarity. It's so familiar that now I can help you with it, to where now you can arrive at your own understanding, whatever that is for you. I also feel like, and this may sound odd, that there are some, especially when we're talking about violations within the family unit. I'm the type of person that I'm going to do my best to extend love to all, even the perpetrators. I believe that they deserve that as well. So I feel like we have just a responsibility almost as humans when we're telling our story to also make sure that we're not telling someone else's story. And that is my way of also extending that love to them. I don't have to go into any detail for me to do my work. I know how it feels in here, right? When I think about it, when it comes up, I know what comes out. So I don't necessarily have to, I'm a 90s kid, so we would say bust you out. I
Yeah.
don't have to bust you out to be able to take care of me. I think that is something that I've kind of learned over the years because there was definitely a time in my life where I did feel like that. I felt like I had to be loud and my energy was going in the wrong direction. The energy should be coming in here to figure out what's going on in here.
It's a very interesting approach, and I think one that not a whole lot of coaches or people who are reaching out to help others even comprehend or practice. And it made me think about the fact that you have been sexually assaulted and where you are now. Is there a connection between your desire to become a life coach and to be trauma informed because of the things that happened to you? Or was there an external drive or something that happened separate from the assaults that got you into your current position and profession as a coach?
I could literally answer that in so many different ways. So I will. I think we've got time, so I think I will. So spiritually, I'll start there because I feel like that's kind of the root of it all. Spiritually, I would say I was always meant to take this path. I very much, very confidently now, and I couldn't always say that either. But today, I confidently identify as a healer, where I know that I have that ability. That is a spiritual gift that I have. I've known that since I was a kid, honestly, since literally from age of 6, had to be 6. I've known that I was a healer. I had a sibling that was a twin, pass away when she was 4 months old. And as you can imagine, my mother, my dear mother, she was just absolutely just devastated and was very depressed, in my personal opinion, for a while. And I recall one morning going into her bedroom after Jennifer passed away. And I come from a church background. So my father was a pastor. So a lot of the activity in the house at that time were church members and, of course, family. All of these women of the church, I just remember them kind of surrounding my mom's bedside and trying to comfort her. And they couldn't get her to eat. It was everything you would imagine for a mother who lost a child. 6 years old, I remember going to her bedside and giving her a glass of water. And she drank the water. I touched her forehead. I gave her a kiss. And I said, Mommy, drink the water. And she drank that water. That's my first recollection of knowing there's something different about you. All of these other women, very seasoned spiritually women, are in this room and no one could get her to drink that water. But I got her to drink that. And I don't think it had as much to do with it, me being her child as to why she drank it. I recognize that now as it was that touch of my hand to her forehead. It was that kiss that I gave her on her cheek. It was that touch. That's what got her to drink that water. That spiritually for me is for sure just an awareness that I've had for a long time. I was not always comfortable with saying that out loud. I used to that used to bother me so much. And then in terms of career path, I do recall during undergrad that there was a professor that told us, and I studied mental health. And he said, many of you are here and you're taking these courses really because you're trying to figure out your own life. And that was easy 20 years ago, 25 years ago, that was said to me, and it has stayed with me all this time. There has been so much pain in my bio family that, yeah, I think there was an aspect of me that was like, figure this out enough to make it make meaning, hopefully keep your life from being a complete mess. And at that time, I was thinking, at the very least, be a good model for my younger cousins or siblings. So there's just so many different things that got me here. I'll also say professionally, I did a bulk of my work early on with those who were healing substance abuse. And so I got into that particular population because I had several substance abuse family members. And so I was able to give them a different perspective of, no, I'm not an addict, because that's really a big thing for those who are healing from that. They want to work with other people that are addicts, which I totally get that. But I was able to, in that time, offer them a different perspective of someone who wasn't an addict, but could give you the other side of what your family is dealing with as a result of your illness. So I was doing that work with them, had a good time doing that work, really enjoyed those individuals, met some really great people along the way. But once we started digging and realizing what it was that was causing a majority of them to use, guess what was at the root? Sexual trauma. They had been sexually violated. They had not had a professional interruption, or what I like to call an alchemist moment, where they were able to make a shift and go in a different direction. Somewhere around 2016, I was having some issues at my employer at that time where there was some discrimination and things like that going on. And I said, you know what? I need to do something specifically with those that are healing sexual trauma. I started Still Whole Wellness, and I haven't looked back. I really believe that mental health has its space, certainly had its place in my life. It definitely helped me. I still have a therapist to this day. Shout out to Susan Little. She's amazing. But I will say that coaching, it allows you to address the issue in a completely different way, not making the client bad or anything like that, but just addressing the issue, peeling back those layers, helping them to see what is. And it's very solution focused. Even as a therapist, I identified as a solution focused therapist because the idea for me of sitting in pain longer than what is necessary is just ludicrous to me. I don't understand the point of it. See the pain, allow yourself to feel it, be familiar enough with it, and then make that alchemist shift, that change in a different direction, and allow that momentum to go in a different direction towards something that can actually move you forward. And that essentially is what coaching is. I help you see some blind spots, help you see some behavioral patterns. We work together to identify a goal, and then we create those action steps. So it moves very fast, a lot faster than traditional therapy. I think that's a big reason of why a lot of people are veering in that direction of coaching. In fact, a lot of therapists are becoming coaches because they see just how beneficial it really can be.
I'm struck by your finding in working with those who have addictions that the root of that addiction is oftentimes the sexual abuse, the sexual assault or a rape as children or even as adults, and what the impact of sexual assault and rape has on people. We're not talking about it enough. We're not recognizing the prevalence of rape and sexual assault. Can you talk a little bit more about that and some of the impacts that you experienced yourself, even as young as 5 years old? That must have had some horrendous impacts in your thinking process. Help us understand that aspect of sexual assault impacting the human mind to the point that it does develop into those addictions, the suicidal ideation, and sometimes suicides. What's your take on all of that with regard to the impact of sexual assault and rape?
What you're speaking to right there is the exact reason of why I created my program, the Alchemist program. Because what that program is designed to do is to show you where the sexual trauma is showing up in your life. And I start with the 4 pillars that I think are part of the human experience, and that's mind, body, spirit, and wealth. So we peeled those onion layers back to look at them with the intentful eye of where is the sexual trauma here, if at all. But I will say that we've always found it.
Yeah.
We've always found it. Because here's the thing, and you spoke to it, like sexual trauma is so much more prevalent than we think it is. Like the numbers that we have, as horrible as they sound, that's not even real numbers. It is so much more prevalent than we could ever imagine. I encourage people to just think about it from this perspective. If you know that 1 in 3 of the people that you know has been sexually violated, just observe. I'm also a metaphysicist, so observation of this stuff is very much a part of what we do. just observe someone's experience. This is that person that is super quiet and they're so quiet that it's annoying to you. This is also the person that is very loud and angry and aggressive. This is that cousin that you gossip about because they can't keep a job. This is that friend that just hasn't really realized their true potential. These are the people. So when we sit back, especially with the people that annoy us, if you could just sit back and consider one in three, this is one of the three. It's just observing people's experience. When you look at life like that, it helps you to be a little more forgiving, a little more gracious, a little more loving. From where I sit and where it really intersects, I think that's kind of what you're asking me. I hope that's what you're kind of
Yeah,
asking
I
me.
think that's a great word for it.
Okay, so I've seen it tremendously in the church where I come from church, my dad being a Baptist pastor for a majority of my childhood. The issue is on both sides. And I think that's where it's really, really challenging because you've got the perpetrators having this space that they're able to cultivate to be able to offend. And then you've got the lack of understanding and wisdom for others in the church, other clergy, other parishioners, to then be able to know what to do with it once you realize that it's in your congregation. I've had many women that I've tried to disclose my abuse to over the years, looking for guidance, looking for help. I've been told anything from don't tell anybody else about it to take it to God, which being in church all my life, they said that, and I had no idea what that even meant. But there was nothing that anyone could offer me that could really help me. And so I definitely see the intersecting in the church. And outside of that, I just see it as a problem. It is a huge problem. When you look at African American community, when you look at the African American woman, and then you take into account those statistics, it makes the Black female journey very challenging. My dad used to say it to me like this. He had three girls that were in the home at any given time. And he would tell us, you're already a woman. That's a strike against you. You're already Black. That's another strike against you. Don't give yourself a third strike. That third strike is up to you, and that's getting an education, which is one of the reasons why I have been very dedicated to my academic journey because of that kind of rearing. But then I had another strike out there that dad didn't really talk about. And I don't even know if he was even aware of how significant it was. And that was I'm Black, I'm a woman. Thank God I got an education, but I've also been sexually violated. Do you have any idea of how just that component alone, how it impacts your ability to go to work every day? Having the traditional job where you have a supervisor for someone who has been sexually violated is probably the most encaged feeling in the world, that you've got to be there for 8 hours. You've got 8 hours of someone being in control of you. That for the psyche of a sexual assault survivor is, I can't even begin to put it into words of what it does. And then to also be a woman, and then to also be a Black woman. And then for me, my education ended up working against me because typically my supervisors were white women. And that was always a problem. So when I say that it is a thing, it's a thing. It is literally a thing. I just have been really focused on just staying in my lane and operating in the space that I believe that the divine has called me to, and that is to help people to see it and offer value and a safe space to where they can then do something with what they now see. That's the whole purpose of the Alchemist program.
It sounds so powerful, and I'm very interested in researching and finding out more from you and from your website. And I think there's a free workbook, am I right, that people can send it away for online.
Mm-hmm.
I think that probably gives a whole lot of insight into what your program is about and what you're striving to do. I just am amazed at some of the insights that you had even before that education took place, and your realization of what it is that you wanted to accomplish through this program and through your education, but also through your own personal experience.
Yeah.
Are you able to remember being 5 years old and trying to even self-assess what had happened to you? and what your coping mechanisms started out being at 5, 6, 7 years old, and how that evolved into avoiding the stigmas that your father pointed out to you, and that I'm sure, as you've just mentioned, it's a thing.
Mm-hmm.
You faced head on all of those stigmas, all of those fights, all of those walls and battles, and you're winning. You're coming out on top. Did that process start when you were 5, after you had been sexually assaulted? Do you remember any of the coping mechanisms and healing processes that you tried to accomplish in your life?
Yes. It's actually kind of funny. My siblings tell the story far better than I do, but I'll try and do it justice. I mentioned the passing of my little sister Jennifer, and there would be times where you could not tell me that I wasn't talking to her. I vividly remember standing on my bed at the foot of my bed that was right underneath my bedroom window, looking out the window and talking to Jennifer. In fact, there was a day that my mom walked past my bedroom door and she's like, "Who are you talking to?" I'm like, "I'm talking to Jennifer." And for my mom, that was, especially that's, 80s. She's like, "No, get down. We don't do that." She kind of felt like it was like a demonic kind of a thing. But all my childhood, my siblings would tease me for talking to myself. I would talk to myself all the time. They would stand outside my bedroom door, burst in. "Ah, you're talking to yourself." Now I understand what that was.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that I do
Wow.
because it helps me to tame down some of the feelings of being crazy. But I now understand that that was me talking to my inner self. That was me talking to that higher calling that's in me and speaking to that aspect of who I am. Because a lot of the times, the things that I was saying was things to build me up, things to remind me of who I am. The other thing I used to do was, again, grew up in church. So the Bible was always like that foundational book for me. It still is to this day. There's so many great aspects of life that we can really pull from the Bible and really learn from it. And so, especially in my teen years, I recall just opening up the Bible and just whatever scripture stood out, just reading that scripture regularly, really meditating on it daily, and trying to figure out how to apply it to my life. There's always just been like these little things that I would do that just kept me grounded. And so even now as an adult, I take walks pretty much every day, weather permitting, of course. But when I'm taking those walks, again, I know my neighbors are probably cracking up at the crazy lady walking down the street with the yellow socks on, talking to
Yeah.
herself. So I'm still 45 and I still do it. Words really, really have power. So I really try my very best to be intentional with my words. I also journal a lot, a lot, a lot, a lot. I write all the time, whether it's in my phone, whether it's in my actual physical journal. I'm always writing, I'm always getting my thoughts out because I learned that with keeping stuff in, that's when it turns into the poison. And I don't want the poison. So I use different ways, my little things to be able to get it up and get it out. I have a method that I share with my clients called the Say It Thrice method. This method is all about getting it up and out. It's all about figuring out what's really going on, getting some good feedback that helps you to get a better grasp on what's going on, and then writing it out to further figure out what's really going on. And then it's not until you've said it thrice, we've communicated the pain 3 times, that is when you then take it to, if it's someone who's offended you or something like that, that's when you take it to them. It's just the process of getting it up and out. That's what I'm trying to ultimately guide my clients with there. Get it up and out. When you go through that process, something really beautiful and significant happens. You get a little more honest about what it is that you're really thinking and feeling and what's really actually happening and not what we tend to, the narrative we tend to tell ourselves. We get the energy of what is happening going in a different direction. Because typically we're telling that story about what's happening out here, what someone has done to us. But if we can redirect that focus internally and figure out what's going on inside, we can get unstuck really quickly. And then when we get that feedback from that trusted friend, that mental health practitioner, this trusted friend has to be chosen with absolute intention. This
Yeah.
cannot be the yes person in your life. This has to be the person that will get raw and ugly and tell you about yourself. Now you've gotten that feedback, you've journaled about it, you've really sat with it, you've really processed it. Now, if it's an issue where you have to go in and now speak to someone about how they've offended you, well, now you really can tell them what it is that really hurt, what it is that they really need to know. And it's aligned now because you've done the work behind the thought. But what we often do is we just spout stuff off and we haven't gone through anything, any kind of a process. We feel the pain and we just respond. So it's just kind of training clients to slow down, write stuff out, really figure out what your thoughts are on it. And so I use the say it thrice on myself. It started with me doing that myself for myself.
I love that concept. I think that's super powerful.
Yeah.
You used a word while you were describing all this of being intentional. I think that's a huge part of healing. We talked earlier about how this needs to be where you are going right now with this whole explanation of your program is that healing process. Tell us your thoughts on what it means to be intentional in your own healing.
I think it starts with your desire, knowing what it is that you really want, really defining what you want. In my professional opinion, there's no intention that you can even set until you figure out what it is that you want.
And that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
So starting there, figuring out what it is that you want, and then deciding. There's some decisions that need to be made there, deciding that you're going to have what it is that you want. There's acceptance, accepting that, yeah, there might be some roadblocks that might come along the way. And when those roadblocks come, you go back to the decision. Being aware of yourself, it does take a lot of practice around being present and being really present and honest with yourself. Some people don't realize that they end up telling me how they feel about themselves. I kind of can get a pretty good gauge on a person within about 10 or 15 minutes about what it is that they feel about themselves and what it is that they feel about their journey, what intention they have placed on it. I can kind of get pretty good sense of what's going on inside and the intentions that they have set by the way that they speak. I can have grace though. I can have grace because this is practice. I tell my clients all the time, and I remind myself all the time, Lori, this is practice. This is not about you setting the intention and knocking it out of the park every single time. This is having the intention of, I'm going to show up well for myself, for my clients, for my family every day. Am I going to do that just perfectly every single time? No. I'm going to practice. I've decided to practice. And when you make that decision, you will just notice that life will continue to give you opportunities to then practice. Think about the last time you said, I want to be more patient. Well, then the next thing you know, 15 minutes later, you're stuck in bumper to bumper traffic. You said it. Now life is giving you the opportunity to practice that patience that you said you wanted to cultivate in your life. So it's practice.
Be careful what you ask for.
Yes. Like I said earlier, words are very important. Very important. Yeah. Because they set the direction for where you're going.
I could talk to you all day. I love listening to you. This is amazing, good stuff. Would you be willing to help us understand your take and your view of what it means to be trauma informed and how that knowledge and that base interlays with those that you're working with, as opposed to not being trauma informed?
I will answer that specifically from the coaching space because that's where I'm most comfortable. I feel that for a coach, being trauma informed is really just boils down to being aware, being really aware of your client and what it is that they need in that moment, knowing when to push, how long to push, because a client will come to me and say that they have a specific goal. And I have to be aware of, are they really ready to tackle that goal? And this is not do what they want to do, But sometimes there are some preliminary things that we have to address before we can tackle that big monster. I think it's really is just being aware of what it is that they need and creating consistently safe space for them to do the work. This means that when I'm in a session, it can't be about me. Well, they're paying me for me to create that capsule for them to do a portion of their work. And so I have to make sure that I'm doing that. Most of my sessions are through Zoom, where I'm able to work with people all over. But during that Zoom, I'm very keyed in and I'm watching facial cues. I'm watching their body language, again, to be aware of where they are. And I think the most important thing for me when it comes to being a trauma-informed coach is to go where the client wants to go. Making sure that I'm not coming to a session with my own agenda and making sure that wherever it is that their heart, their spirit is guiding them, even in that session, that's where we go. That's where we do the work. Yeah.
I love that answer. I think that's a very important aspect of what it means to be trauma informed. And you touched on this. You have to be aware of what your client's needs are in that trauma informed approach, but you also cannot, as a coach, you can't separate your own traumas from your life. I mean, you are who you are because of what you've experienced and how that impacted you and what you've done with that. Can you talk to us about how you embrace your traumas to help others embrace theirs?
You're absolutely right. We have to be able to know what to do with our own stuff before we can begin to try and guide somebody else. Again, a part of that coaching's creed is to always be 2 to 3 steps ahead of my client. And as long as I'm 2 to 3 steps ahead of them, well, then I can consistently then guide them. But you're absolutely right. I have to know what I refer to my clients as their go-tos. I have to know my go-tos. I have to know what are some of those self-soothing things that I can do to deal with my own stuff. And I have to have dealt with it enough to where I can guide other clients. And so here's, I also have another rule that I don't go in the direction with a client that I have not traveled yet myself. If I haven't dealt with it myself, I have enough confidence to just tell the client, hey, that's a piece of my own stuff that I simply have not dealt with yet. I can do this work over here with you if you're open to that. If not, here are 15 other amazing coaches that I know, some I've trained personally, and I know they can help you with this particular thing. But I don't go where I haven't gone. I've been doing this a long time. I'm just not going to do it because you're absolutely right. It just causes more harm to them. Then the session does become about you doing your work. I think it's very healthy in a coaching relationship for a coach to have new awarenesses. A client might say something that sparks a new idea. But if you're a coach and you're listening to this and you have a client that says something and it's like, the light bulb went on for you for the first time, you're probably working in a space that you maybe should not work because it should not be like this big thing of, oh, this healed me. If you have a new awareness, that's normal. You're human. I do not go with my clients in a place that I haven't gone first myself and done significant work myself.
Yeah. Lori, do you want to talk about Still Whole Wellness and tell us more about what that program is about? I'm sure there are people in my audience who probably will look that up and want to explore more, and having heard you now, want to know more about you and may want to become a client. Can you talk to us about what that program is all about, what inspired it, where it's going, what you see for it in the future?
Oh, are you giving me permission to dream? I think I like that. It definitely started, like I mentioned before, in doing that work with the substance abuse clients. And 2016, made that decision to make the shift, to open the business. My primary function is as a coach, but I do have a service menu where I also offer Reiki because, as you heard Anne mentioned here, the other episode, that it's not just enough to just talk through it. It's not. It's just not. This is the reason why we see some of the pathology that we see in society today, because people are trying to deal with sexual trauma just in the mind. And it is an offense of the body. So the body then has to be nurtured, cared for, rebuilt, Some things, some energies have got to be removed for you to really feel that shift. Again, I am a metaphysicist, so I do also offer oracle readings as well as Akashic records. So those are just some of the services that are offered there. And then I have a couple of different programs. My primary program is the Alchemist program. That's the one that I mentioned before, where the focus is on mind, body, and spirit. And I also do coach couples through that process as well, because more often than not, what we find is there is one person in the couple that has been violated. And so now, how does the partner, how do they handle their heart now, knowing this? How is this violation now impacting the marriage? There's the Alchemist program. I'm rolling out a new program probably by summer. I will have it completed by summer, and that is called the Healthy Empath program. That program is all about the interconnectedness of sexual trauma and toxic relationships. Because what I also find, and it's so fascinating to like look at the numbers on it. What I find often is the person who has been sexually violated will also later in life also identify as an empath. In fact, I think if I recall the numbers, I think it was like 38%, something like that. They also identify as an empath. And so this empathic person, you're going through life, you haven't dealt with the pain. What do we think is going to happen? Energetically, we are going to call in that vibrational match to where we are. So we can want this amazing partner that is so loving and so caring and puts you first and all this stuff. And then we don't get that. Well, the reason we don't get that is because we're not a vibrational match to what it is that we desire. So I help to get you to that vibrational match. And then now we are able to call in a more healthy, more sound relationship. So that program is really geared towards helping you to identify that toxic person so that you can kind of sidestep them and additional pain and trauma that they will undoubtedly bring. And if you're in a toxic relationship and it is something where you feel like you have to stay, well, now we're going to work and we're going to develop strategy around how you stay. So now you understand what it is that you're in. I take you through that process of acceptance. Then we strategize on how to stay to where you don't lose yourself, to where you don't feel like you're going absolutely batty wacko, and you still feel grounded and very centered. And then I also train coaches through the SWW Academy. So if people are listening and they've wanted to become a coach, maybe you're like me and you've long since identified yourself as a healer, that is an avenue that you can take.
That's awesome. And I know that that's part of what your whole focus is getting people to the place in their lives where they say, I am a survivor. I can survive this. And you are their community and you are their touch point for all of that. Are you able to describe for this audience what it feels like to you personally to be that touch point?
Oh my gosh.
I know, right? But you are having such a strong impact. And I heard from one of your clients personally, we just talked about her, Ann Winslow, who cannot stop singing your praises because you are her touch point. Tell me what that does for you.
It's very simple for me. There's nothing super profound. It validates my experience. It validates my experience. It helps me to know that everything that I've dealt with, it was in divine order. It was in divine order. I've been criticized, and so I just want to apologize to your listeners in advance. And I don't mean any disrespect by this, but it truly is the thing. It's the thing that helped me, and it was making that pivotal alchemist shift of sexual assault happened for me, not to me. Once I made that shift, and I've been criticized like you would not believe about this. How could you possibly say that? I was a child. I get it. I get it. I was in that place. I get it. I tried to commit suicide several times in my life. I get it. But here's what I think I know. That hurt. I didn't like that it hurt. I don't really want it to hurt anymore. What do I do to make it not hurt? That's what it became for me. And it was that shift that it happened for me, not to me. If it happened to me, I get to continue to be the victim. I never get to feel victorious and rise and feel strong. I don't get to feel that from that space. So I had to shift because, again, it hurt. I didn't like it. And I wanted it to not hurt anymore. So the reason why my company is called Still Whole Wellness, and my dear aunt who helped me to set up the business, she argued me through the floor about the name of the business, but I was very steadfast and unmovable. The reason it is named Still Whole Wellness is because my mission, my absolute goal, is to remind people that you can still be whole after sexual trauma. You can. It is not a death sentence. It doesn't have to be where you are living in this victim seat for the rest of your days. Where I was getting the pushback from people is because people didn't like me saying that it's a choice, because then I was then accused of victim blaming. I'm not saying that what happened to you was a choice. I'm saying that your response to it is a choice. You can either choose to continue to be in that victim space, or you can choose to get out of it. I knew that if I didn't make the choice to get out of it, my children would be motherless. That's a painful realization. I didn't have a choice. I had to figure out a way to reframe the pain to get out of that victim seat. And this is one of the most freeing things about coaching versus working in traditional therapy at different agencies and things like that. When I was doing that work, I didn't have any choice of who was on my caseload. My supervisor assigned me a caseload and I had to work those cases. As a coach, I have the freedom and the ability to say, with love, with absolute love, you're not ready for what it is that I'm providing here. Because if you are really comfortable and nice and nestled in that victim seat and you're not really wanting to get out of it, you're not ready for me. You're not ready to do the work over here. Because what I won't do is victimize you again by then trying to pull you out of the victim seat. I'm going to give you the tools along the way so that you can find yourself out of that space, because I also know it's not my job to save you. And I would be doing you a huge disservice for even trying. It is for me to give you the tools for you to save yourself, because that's one of the major, major victories that we get to have as survivors, is that active participating role that we play in getting out the seat. So I'm just going to give you the tools. And as long as you keep going, I tell my clients all the time, I got you as long as you got you. But I'm never going to fight harder for you than you fight for yourself. I'm not going to pull you out the seat. I'm going to give you the tools. We're going to set a plan, but it's what you do after the session is over. That's the work. If you're applying those tools, that's the work.
Dr. Lori, I love that analogy of you saying, I'm not going to drag you out of that seat. I'm not going to pull you up. I'm going to give you the tools for you to get up yourself and walk away from that chair.
Because that's the strength that you need to be able to take the next step. So I dare not take that away from you.
Right.
One of the best things that my mom could have ever done for me was when my perpetrator got out of jail. When I mentioned that, he got out of jail and reached out. I went to my mom. He reached out, totally freaking out. What do I do? What do I do? At the time, I was so angry with my mother because her words to me, and it's going to sound so cold, so brace yourself. She told me, she said, when you were a kid, there was nothing you could do to fix it. You're not a kid anymore. Go fix it. And I was fuming, because I'm like, again, that victim mentality. This is when the light bulb started going on for me. I'm like, you have an opportunity to save me. I'm your child. You have an opportunity to fix this for me. And you're sitting here telling me, go figure it out myself? Are you crazy, lady? I was livid with my mother. But when I sit here, as I sit here today, when I tell you it was the best thing she could have ever done for me, it was the best thing because she gave me wings that day. Not only did she give me wings, I was able to actually figure out how strong those wings really were. because I took myself down there to that probation officer. And when I got there, by the way, she told me she wasn't surprised that I was there. She said, I knew that this was coming. What do you mean? He's been speaking about you ever since he's been on my caseload. I knew this was going to happen. I knew he was going to violate. I get down there and I got a chance to take care of me for me. It was my first opportunity to say, this is a piece of my story that I get to be the hero. I saved me. Best thing my mother could have ever done.
And you said it earlier. This is just a parallel to what you just described is your sexual assault didn't happen to you. It happened for you. Your mom didn't take over to happen to you. She said, go fix it yourself. That happened for you.
Absolutely.
Wow.
But do you know, it took me until she passed away to realize that.
Mm.
Yeah.
I am so very sorry for the experiences that you have felt and gone through. But I am so grateful that because of those experiences, you became who you are. I really appreciate you and your willingness to be raw and open and honest. This has been amazing. I have truly enjoyed my time with you. Dr. Laura, when we talk about our own sexual trauma, our rape, our sexual assault, it brings up things in our minds that maybe don't come out of our mouths. Like you said, there are certain things that you can't talk about, but anytime somebody asks you questions or invites you to talk about that trauma, I know how the brain works, and those things come up and they sometimes fester and sometimes knock at your door to say, you haven't fixed me yet. I'm right here. You've got me to deal with still. Are you willing to share with the audience what it is that you do to take care of yourself?
Absolutely. So my first thing, it really goes back to what I mentioned earlier, and that's writing. Writing has been such an instrumental tool for me. I tell my clients often that it is the most immediate healing tool we have at our immediate disposal, but it's yet the most underused, is what I typically find. So my clients are constantly being encouraged to journal in some capacity. So there will be some journaling, without a doubt, just being able to give myself room to express myself with what has taken place here today and what it is that I'm thinking and feeling about it. And then I am very much an earth girl. So I'm certain that there will be some grounding. I will probably take a walk. I usually try and take a walk in the afternoons, given my schedule. Either in the morning when I first get up or in the afternoon, I'm going for a walk. It's something about that sun hitting my eyes. We know that that vitamin D, that's going to help to improve my mood overall. And so definitely taking that walk will be in the near future. I have a client in a little bit, but after I'm done with him, I will be free until probably about 4 o'clock. So I'll get a good, nice little hike in. And I also like to just sit because I talk for a living, essentially. I'll sit and just allow just the silence to just be there and just be present in that silence. It doesn't have to be anything going on. I don't even need any meditative music. I used to need that. I no longer necessarily require that. Just silence, just being in that stillness with just me and the divine. It's got to be there every day.
Well, thank you for that. I encourage you to do those things, and I'll coach you. Yes, take your walk, and yes, journal.
Yes.
Dr. Lori, you are an asset to this podcast, and I can't thank you enough for being here. And I do also want to throw out there that I would love to have you back.
I would love to come back. Yeah.
Thank you.
I love connecting with people. So I'm totally all about that. And again, I have to salute you because this space that you have created is so needed for people to have a safe space for them to be able to share their story. Some I would imagine, or maybe even for the first time, for you to be creating that space for them is absolutely phenomenal. So I just salute you and the work that you're doing. And I want you to know that you are needed. We need you. So keep doing what you're doing, please.
Thank you so much. That means the world to me. And those words are fuel. So
there you go.
Thank you so much. I appreciate all that. I want people to hear that this platform is for them, that it is a space that is safe, that they can talk about whatever they want to talk about in their sexual assault and rape experience and feel like they are going to be believed and that they are not going to be blamed and that they can gain something from that experience of talking about what they've been through. Take care of yourself.
I will. You too, my friend.
We'll talk again soon.
Be well.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
That does it for another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. I want to give a huge thank you to Dr. Lori Pitts for the time she spent with me this week. Dr. Lori, your contribution in time, energy, and insights to this show are truly appreciated by me and the SAS audience. Thank you again for being here and for all that you do to help bring justice to victims and survivors of rape and sexual assault. A heartfelt thank you also goes out to my listeners for tuning in again to SAS. Your presence here is what keeps this podcast alive and thriving. I've been getting several emails and texts each month from listeners expressing their appreciation and gratitude for the existence of this show and what a positive impact SAS is having in your lives. For those of you who have written, I want to express my own appreciation right back to you for your loyalty to the show and for trusting me with your personal stories of sexual assault and rape. Please keep listening and supporting SAS. It's an honor to have you as my listeners, and I want to be here for you just as you are here for me. Please keep those texts and emails coming. And if you have a story of being raped or sexually assaulted and you feel you're far enough along in your healing journey that you'd like to share your story on the show, send me an email letting me know of your interest, and we'll talk about the possibility of you being a guest on the show. My email address is davemarkel@gmail.com. That's DAVEMARKEL@gmail.com. I'm grateful for your interest and look forward to hearing from you. I also want to encourage each of you to do your part in helping bring down the prevalence of rape and sexual assault and to help bring justice to victims and survivors of these horrendous crimes. One of the best ways to do this is to start by believing, because we all know someone whose life has been affected by rape or sexual assault. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next week.